Welcome back. Now, South Africa's bilateral relationship with the U.S. is less than rosy, even after President Ramaphosa sat down with his U.S. counterpart in the Oval Office in May. Since then, President Trump has imposed a 30% tariff on South Africa, which takes effect in August, while a further threat of an additional 10% tariff on nations siding with BRICS countries. Ramaphosa is opposing the 30%, citing that it is an inaccurate representation of available trade data. Political editor of Business Day, Hajra Omarjee, joins us with her take on the politics behind Trump's tariffs. Hajra, thanks so much for your time today, and let's perhaps start by putting things into perspective and reflecting on how everything has unfolded post the meeting between President Trump and President Ramaphosa. While mending bilateral relations and clearing allegations of a white genocide in the country were at the top of the agenda, that meeting was also a starting point for conversations around trade, right?
So there were 12 farm murders in South Africa in the last financial year, and only one of those murders were white men. But I've spent a lot of time reconciling how South Africans felt after the meeting with Trump. And we were saddened because for a long time we've accepted and been conditioned to accept the issue of crime in South Africa. 1,600 people are murdered every day. Only 1 out of 20 are successfully prosecuted. And so we've got a lot to clean up in our own backyard. However, on the Trump trade tariffs, what he's done is set a tariff based on the trade deficit that country has with other countries. Mm-hmm. Now, it is unreasonable for us to be able to trade with the United States, which is a much bigger economy, on an even basis. We put a trade deal to the US, which included what it wanted, which is for us to import LNG gas from Mozambique or from the US through ships, and as well as an agriculture deal. We got no feedback on that deal for 3 months. Now we've got just a few weeks to try to finalize a new deal. What I can tell you is that high-level negotiations are taking place, and that the South African government ministers have been asked to sign NDAs.
Okay.
So we're not expected to get a lot of detail until the trade deal is in place. But I do think we'll see a drop of the 30% tariff increase. I don't know if it'll be 25% or 10%.
And that was going to be my next question, just your reading on the situation and whether those tariffs will stick as, you know, those ongoing negotiations take place in the background, whether we do have room to negotiate. And just looking at, you know, market expectations, they do expect, traders expect Trump to paddle back. And so traders are only pricing in about 10 to 15% of tariffs. That, of course, excluding those sectorial tariffs.
So with 10% or 15%, which the market has factored in, we should still see economic growth. Mm-hmm. If it is more than that, then we could see a devastating result for the South African economy, and we could also see, South Africa going into technical recession. If anyone from the US is listening, I think it's worth mentioning that we appreciate our trade deals with the United States. We do want a bilateral deal far more than a AGOA, because we feel like we can do a lot more trade with the US. And compared to China, we value add to products before we send to the US, while we send just raw materials to China. China has also not made any strategic investments in South Africa besides perhaps Huawei, while there are over 600 businesses operating from the US in South Africa. So I've written to people like Chairman Adrian Gore to ask him if he would allow business leaders to come out and speak about, how punishing South Africa would be bad for U.S. business.
And just sticking with AGOA then, Hajra, do these tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, the sectorial tariffs, signal an end to AGOA? We haven't heard much about it, and that, deadline is fast approaching.
Without a doubt. These tariffs would mark an end to AGOA. The good news is that AGOA only contributes between 3 and 4% to our economy. What we have always wanted is a bilateral deal similar to that which we have with China, with the US, which would benefit us a lot more.
All right, let's look at how then SA positions itself, outside of our compromised relations with the US. SA is also part of BRICS, and Trump has threatened, additional 10% tariffs on BRICS-aligned nations.
So that's the thing. There isn't a sub-Saharan template for the US trade tariffs. It seems like he's penalizing specific countries, especially South Africa. He's come off the white genocide horse at least, but the template is based on which countries he has a deficit with. However, there isn't a sub-Saharan template. What is important is we stop relying on US, Europe, and Chinese and Asian trade partners and get the Africa Free Trade Agreement going in order for us to trade with ourselves, and that is the solution to all our economic problems.
I don't know, man. It seems like we're fighting a losing battle. No matter how much we try and negotiate with Trump, it doesn't seem like we're winning, Hajra.
Well, he has climbed down on white genocide, which I do believe was fed to him by Elon Musk and AfriForum. And there's some evidence that whatever Deputy Trade and Industry Minister Andrew Whitfield said when he went to the US in February did have a negative impact on us, because it is the Hudson Foundation, it is the Rasul being sent home as South African ambassador to the US shortly after Whitfield came back from the US. So I think we need to speak through diplomatic channels. I think we need to have one voice. The US need to be more clear on our feedback on our trade proposal. And they are an important trading partner, and we certainly would not want to lose them. But like I said, Africa's solutions lies in Africa. If we can get the free trade agreement going, if we can open channels of exports and imports into Africa, as well as building infrastructure, we won't need the rest of the world.
All right, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Hajra, thanks so much for your time and sharing those insights. That was political editor of Business Day, Hajra Omarjee.